Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to recreate another painting by another great master, another artist that I love. Today we are going to be looking at Georges Rodrigue's Loup-Garou, otherwise known as the Blue Dog. This is one of the earliest paintings of what became a large series of Blue Dog paintings that he worked on for the last 30 years of his life. It's these Blue Dog paintings that he did are, I'm sure you've seen them somewhere, perhaps in some advertisements, which we'll look at here. It is, for many people, this might be one of the most recognizable characters in all of painting. So it's... and for some people, maybe this is the first time you've ever seen this image. So that's what's kind of interesting is how art finds its way into different audiences. So there's a lot to talk about and a lot to get to here. So let's jump right into it here. So if you're watching the video after it aired, there's the timestamps in the playlist below, and you can jump to wherever you want if you want to skip over this right here. We're going to start with getting the image onto the canvas. We're going to do a little bit of a quick stain on there. We're going to talk about Rodrigue's biography and the significance of the Blue Dog paintings and the whole career of art that he had before that. What kind of paintings he was making before he stumbled upon this iconic image. I don't think, well, maybe I don't think we're going to do underpainting, but we'll have to take a look at the work itself to see. Then we're going to do some background, foreground, and we'll finish up, I like to say 2.5 hours from now, but every time I say that, it ends up being 7 hours. So I hesitate to make any predictions. Of course, if you're joining us for the first time, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when new episodes are coming out. Take a photograph of the art that you created and upload it to our Facebook group. There's, I think, almost 1,000 people part of that group now, which is amazing. It just started out as a comment here in the chat a couple of years ago, and it just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And thanks to all those of you that have been with me for years, and those of you that just joined today. And if you want to support the channel, there's a couple ways you can do that. The easiest way would be through PayPal. There's a PayPal link below. You can use the YouTube Super Chat function and donate directly through YouTube, but they take 40% of whatever you donate, whereas PayPal takes, I think, like 1%. You can send an e-transfer via email, and that costs about $1, and then we get the majority of your donation. So let's dive right into this episode. Let's go. Come on, scroll. Okay, so our first step is to get an image onto a canvas. And let's get a canvas out. That would be handy. Okay, so what we're going to do, we could draw this out. This is an artwork that might not be super complex to reproduce, and if you want, you could take my drawing course. It's free, and you would improve your drawing immeasurably. Oh, this is the Facebook group. I encourage you to join. But in terms of this template, I've done a free template. I traced the original image on my iPad Pro using the Procreate app. And I've got inside, there's a link in the description below for the Dropbox folder. You're going to see the basic resources for the first few episodes, like how to get started, what kind of paint to buy. And then the next 50 or so paintings, of which there are about 30 folders of them, are for relatively easy paintings. Some of them are a little more complex than others, as you may have found out. And today's painting is right in here. 00Z27 or Z27, depending on how you pronounce it, and then there's also another 150 folders below that, like the Mona Lisa, and I'm guarantee you there's some art in there that you might enjoy. So we click in here, you'll see that there's 3 files. There's the original plus 2 versions of the outline, a JPEG and a PDF, whatever's easier for you to print out on your home printer. You don't need any special equipment or anything like that to do this. So once you've got that, then we're going to put it onto a canvas panel or canvas board. You can buy these from the dollar store, and they work just as well. These ones, though, I've ordered off Amazon. I do like them. They're a little bit sturdier, and I think they're probably more archival. They're going to last a little bit longer. It's a 9x12 size, right? So, and they come pre-wrapped in plastic, and then I put a little bit, I sand it gently, and then I've got a little block of sandpaper stapled around a block of wood, 2x4, and then I apply another coat of acrylic gesso, white acrylic gesso, let that dry overnight and sand it again, and it gets nice and smooth. So nice. Okay, so let's attach this here. And you can do this with like a photo from a newspaper, or a photocopy of a photo from a newspaper or magazine, or a photo of your family. You can even make your own drawing and transfer that drawing on here. And that's what I do when we draw. I teach painting classes in person. We'll sketch it out on just a regular piece of photocopy paper, and then do this transfer process. That way you're not mucking up your drawing with a bunch of pencil lines. You can kind of sort out exactly what you want to do, and then use carbon transfer paper, or technically this is graphite transfer paper, in this envelope. And you can see that it's been used many times. I'm going to put the shiny black side facing down, and I'm going to use a pen. I like using a red pen, that way I can very quickly and easily see which lines I've done and which lines have yet to be done. I used to do this with a red pencil, and the thing is the pencil, as it got dull, would make the lines wider and wider and wider, and sometimes break, because you're kind of pressing, well, not super hard. I'm not like, but you have to press a certain weight to get those lines to come across onto the other side, right? Sometimes it's to your advantage to go a little bit more light, or press more lightly on here. And I'm not going to do all the lines in the background. That is something I feel confident enough to be able to do without the outline. And you can see I'm not also going over these with too much concern over accuracy, right? This is just to help me get the painting started and get the composition set up. I don't want to be, focused on, painting inside the lines or anything, right? I want freedom here, and actually find this provides me with more freedom. Than trying to sketch it all out, because then I can feel a little bit like haphazard. Now I just wonder, okay, so before I peel this off, that looks good. I'm just gonna move his signature, so I got kind of, because I think I don't often do the signatures on these artworks, but I think today I will, and I'm just moving that so that it's well centered on this, there. Okay. Boom. Clean this up a little bit. And actually, I always say I like to keep this kind of handy, so if I want to refer to it, I'm just going to put it right up there. Wow, look at all the comments. This is great. Wow, and a whole bunch of names here I do not recognize. That's fantastic. There's Lisa and Pascal and Kathy and Zinab, Adrian. Cool. Wow. There's so many comments. I'll come back to that here after I get a little further down in the project and scroll through all those comments. But thank you everyone for tuning in and for engaging in the chat. That's also awesome. There's some people who just tune in just to chat with friends in the chat, which is great. That's awesome. I'm happy to facilitate this community. So, okay, let's move on to our next step here. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to stain this painting with a little bit of color. And maybe before I do that, the so-called priming layer of paint, let's just talk about what paint I'm going to use to begin with. I'm going to use what's called a split primary palette. Now, you can use whatever method you want, but if you want to get the same results I'm doing, and I've done this for almost 300 episodes, and of some of those episodes I did 5 or 6 paintings in the same one, right? So almost 500 paintings using the same set of paints. It works. It's proven. I mean, anyway, people will debate me anyway, but essentially what this split primary palette means is we're going to use 8 tubes of paint, and we can mix virtually 98% of all the visible colors, and that means we're going to use 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. So we've split the so-called primary colors in half, so now we have a warm and a cool of each. Now, every color has a temperature, and so it's using color temperature effectively can create lots of depth in a painting, and it's the secret power of the split primary palette. Now, I'm not going to use black because we can also mix our own black using warm red, cool blue, and cool yellow. Now, we're going to do this during the painting, so we'll come back to it. So effectively, really, I'm only going to use 7 tubes of paint. And I've done the vast majority of these paintings without actually opening my black tube of paint. Even the black and white paintings that I've done, I mixed all the colors together. So this is the brand that I'm going to use here. This is this Amsterdam paint, and generally I use this Azo Yellow Deep, which is a warm yellow, as my stain. Now, I'm not sponsored. I'm not paid by anybody. Nobody gave me a single dollop of free paint or paintbrushes or anything. All of this is stuff that I've purchased on my own and what I recommend to really any artist, but specifically a beginner painter, because this Amsterdam paint, you get sort of the best bang for the buck. It's not the best paint you can get, but it's not the worst paint you can get. It's probably the cheapest paint for the highest quality you can buy. Now, if you want to spend 3 times the amount for 3 times less paint, you could go with Golden. They're really good, and this would be the color I would use for my background. But again, you're paying a lot more, and especially if you're just beginning, I think you may want to kind of err on the side of getting less expensive paints so that the stakes are low. If the painting doesn't turn out, just a cup of coffee that you spilt, you know, getting into your car or something, versus like, whoa, that was like, you know, coffee for the office that I spilt, you know, for 5 people, you know, before the meeting. That's a bigger bummer, right? Now, you could use Liquitex, you could use Winsor & Newton, Artist Loft. You can obviously just pause these, and this is also in the introductory episode number 1. Buzz, Peebo. Well, I'm not such a fan of Peebo anymore. Holbein, Daler-Rowney, Fevicryl, Novacolor, Chromacolor, but not Museum Color, nor do I really fully endorse Peebo, because most paints, or at least less expensive paints, mix titanium white into the paint as a kind of a filler, and I noticed that Peebo and this Museum Color add too much, which makes it impossible to make a black using the recipe that I give you. So if you don't care about black and you want to use your own black, go right ahead. You won't really have too much of a problem. But anyway, just kind of throwing that out there in case you're like, how come I can't get the colors you're getting? Well, that would explain. So, let's go here. Oh, and there's Christine joined us as well. Okay. So, let's put some paint on my palette right here. Well, I've got these tubes out. So each of these tubes of paint costs about $12 to $15, depending on where you get them from. And these are the 250 milliliters or 8.5 fluid ounce tubes. Now, I'm not gonna put some warm red or cool red on there. I've noticed that I rarely use it, so I'm just gonna err on the side of not putting that on my palette for today. This is Opus brand paint. I think this Amsterdam paint is having supply issues, as many things are these days, and I've had a hard time getting these tubes in, so that might be a reason why you might not be able to use the exact same palette I am. But anyway, I can't find their white, so I'm using a different brand, which, oops, is not a huge deal mixing different paints from different companies. I mean, every company has their own kind of proprietary, you know, way of making paint. And they might use slightly different chemicals or ratios of those chemicals and different pigment sourced from different vendors and stuff. So sometimes they are going to be a little bit different and will behave differently when they're mixed together. You know, it's similar when, you know, you read a recipe and they say you need to use like a specific kind of flour, right? It can't be just, you know, it's like what are some of those kind of, there's a lot more kind of flours that exist now, specialty flours like nut flours and stuff that and so let's say you don't have access to that and you just substitute, you know, your regular whole wheat or white enriched flour. Well, it's possible that the, I don't know, oatmeal cookies, or does there flour in oatmeal cookies? It's possible they won't turn out exactly like the recipe, but you'll get pretty close. One little kind of thing here. Often when I'm making a painting that is vertical like this, you can see the stripes, or as I'm brushing the brush strokes vertically, that is, I think, probably more desirable, because if there is any ridges that happen on here, they're going to be maybe less visible than if they were horizontal, because then the light is going to kind of hit the tops of those brush strokes, so the verticalness of them is less likely to make visible that texture. Now, that's one of the reasons I put a bit of water in there, is it kind of thins it down. It helps it get into the texture of the canvas, so it's less likely to have any texture there. Now, most artists are I'm probably the only one who's ever used this warm yellow like this. So if you're like, oh, that's weird, I've never seen anybody do that. Well, yeah, no, definitely, you certainly haven't. But why do I do it then? It's because it's faster and easier than mixing a brown. Obviously, you could buy your own brown, but I like sticking to this limited palette. And as I've proven over the course of years now, that There is a difference if we use a different color Imprimatura, whether we use the original brown that artists have been using for hundreds of years or this yellow. But you really only notice if they're side by side. If we were to put them on the opposite sides of a room, you probably wouldn't know the difference. Okay. So we're going to let this dry. And, you know, maybe just sort of looking at this painting here, you can see this warm yellow, I think, is going to work absolutely perfect for our purpose here. Whether Rodrigue actually used any Imprimatura or a yellow Imprimatura is debatable. It wouldn't surprise me if he did not do that, because there is increasingly more artists today that don't stain the canvas at all. I think if you're a beginner painter, it really elevates your painting instantly by putting some kind of color here. It's one of those things that you may not appreciate until you don't do it, and then it sometimes just looks a little unfinished. Obviously, if you're a more experienced painter, you can do whatever you want, but just like kind of putting it out there as an introducing to people that that's an option for painting. Okay. Now let's take a little bit of a moment to talk about Georges Rodrigue and the significance of this particular series of paintings, the Loup-Garou, or the Blue Dog series, and his biography in general here. So I got lots of tabs, and let's see if I can go through them in the order that I wanted here. Oh, and there's Lolly there as well. Great. Oh my goodness, the whole band is back together. Okay, so Georges Rodrigue is born in 1944 and passes away at age 69 in 2013. And so he lived a fairly, fairly long life, although he kind of died kind of unexpectedly of lung cancer, to which he, suspected possibly some of the spray varnish he was using in his unventilated studio earlier on in his career contributed to that cancer. Who knows what he would have done had he lived another 20, 30 years. But he certainly managed to create a lot of work during that, during his career. So let's just take a quick look here. So he's born in New Iberia, Louisiana, and I had to look that up. I was like, New Iberia, where is that? What is that? So it is this kind of a town in Louisiana, in the southern United States, along the Gulf of Mexico here. And you can see it's kind of near Lafayette. And you have New Orleans over here, so in Baton Rouge. And if we just keep on zooming out, you can see a little bit of the shape, the boot of Louisiana here. There's Texas and Florida as well. Obviously, anyone who knows a little bit about history knows that this is an area that has been prone to flooding over the centuries and has, gives it that particular kind of swampy, muggy, hot landscape that was generally seen as kind of an undesirable place to live by the colonial settlers, the French, Spanish, and the British, which is why a particular group of people were sent to live there, or encouraged to move there, depending on how you see the story of the Acadian people who were forcibly evicted from French Canada during and after the 7 Years' War. So this sort of sent me down a little bit of a pipeline, because Georges Rodrigue is of Acadian descent, or as he calls himself, he apparently was the first person to call himself a Cajun artist. And so Acadia, or the Acadian people, were people that lived in French Canada during they moved there in the 1500s, 1600s, and during the course of the 7 Years' War, which was a huge war that engulfed much of Europe, mainly between England and France, and the outcome of this war, essentially, the British won the war, and against the French, and really one of the most famous battles of all time here, or at least in Canadian or North American history, is the Battle of Plains d'Abraham, which is kind of this big field on top of a hill in Quebec City, and this very famous painting by Benjamin West, The Death of General Wolfe, which if you're Canadian, you've probably seen at some point in your history class. But during that there's all sorts of conflicts on both sides of the ocean, but it's the at least for our story today, and for those of us in North America, the main aspect was the British defeating the French, and the French seceding French Canada to the British. And one of the things that the British did is that they forcibly evicted this large population of Acadian people, French Canadians, from kind of New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Quebec. And many of them, about a third of those people who were evicted from what was now British Canada, died on their journeys going in various different locations, but many of them settled down into southern Louisiana, so in an area that's now called Acadiana. And here you can see this is exactly where we were talking about for the painting, or from, not the painting, this is the area where today's artist Georges Rodrigue is from. So you have New Orleans right here in New Iberia, and so you can see that's kind of right in this area here, right? I don't want to, let me see. That's certainly, I'll say I've always wanted to go down to Louisiana, and maybe being a Canadian and speaking French as a second language, the idea of going to any place where I can use my French is very enticing. Let's see. So what I want to do here is just show you some, well, maybe let me go back to his biography here. So he attends a Catholic school in New Iberia, and he eventually studies at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, or what was formerly known as the University of Southwestern Louisiana, and then completes his education at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, the same school that I went to get my master's in fine art. And so he's considered, Georges Rodrigue is considered to be one of the most prominent alumni of my alma mater. And so for me, it's kind of neat to spend a little bit of time looking at an artist who spent a little bit of time in the same institution that I did. Institution. And so after he graduates from Art Center in Pasadena, California, which is like a 5-minute drive north of downtown Los Angeles, he returned back to Louisiana, and he really started to really explore his roots, his personal history, the history of his of Cajun people. Where did I have? So let's just take a look at some of the paintings that he made. And I think it's the same sort of thing with myself. Like, when I was growing, I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and never really thought much about what it was like, what it means to be Canadian. It wasn't until I moved down to the United States to go to school. I went to school in New York and then into Los Angeles. That I think you're confronted by a different culture, and you become obsessed with like trying to define your background from the new place you're living in. And when I was living in Los Angeles, I'm reading all these books about Canadian history, and so I imagine it might be the same sort of thing with Rodrigue. He goes from Louisiana to Los Angeles, which in many ways couldn't have been more different, and probably missed home and wanted to tell, share with his friends and colleagues and a little bit about who he was. And so that kind of creates this investigation into Louisiana landscapes and Cajun culture. And so for the first like 20 years of his career, he's making these paintings which often very moody and feature these iconic type of trees that grow in the southeastern United States. These big, there's a particular name for these oak trees that I can't remember offhand, but they are very mossy, and they look like Dr. Seuss fingers. These very long, tentacly, dangling vines and droopy branches, and which lends itself to a particular kind of moody atmosphere, right? That there's a reason why, well, at least when I was growing up, that so many horror movies took place in these kind of swampy, marshy Louisiana, Floridian landscapes, because it's such a kind of a hostile landscape for people to live in, right? You have there's quicksand and swamps and things that people can easily get stuck in or fall into and just disappear that way. Of course, you got crocodiles and mosquitoes and all sorts of things that make living down there, and of course the in many ways oppressive heat, and then the almost yearly flooding. So that's kind of the subject of his work for these first 20 years, is depicting Louisiana landscapes, and then depicting kind of the history of the Acadian people and the Great Deportation from French Canada and the resettlement down in Louisiana. And then there's a subsequent return back to Canada, but with some of them later on. That's a whole other story. So he makes this sort of cycle of paintings depicting that kind of history. You could see here's him in 1974 with his work exhibited, and we don't see any dogs in these paintings at all, right? So one of the things that he ends up doing is some commissions for book covers, in this case like a series of ghost stories. And this is kind of like marks a big breakthrough, and really the eventual first appearance of the Loup-Garou, or what becomes the blue dog. So this is this painting that he makes. The text was laid in afterwards for this ghost story book. And one of the paintings in that he's asked to do is a painting that depicts the story of the Loup-Garou. The Loup-Garou is a particular kind of Cajun myth of essentially a werewolf, a person that turns into this werewolf at night and terrorizes the locals. And so when he was thinking like, what kind of dog or werewolf am I going to paint? Like, what would be the source image for this story? He finds an old picture of his dog that he had growing up called Tiffany, who had at this point already passed away years before. And he's like, there's something kind of funny and charming about this tiny little dog becoming this, vicious monster that terrorizes the locals. And so and then I think it's also a way of maybe commemorating his dog. Who knows how much thought necessarily went into this choice, but it proved to be fortuitous because once he depicted this dog, and I think this is the first image of that dog, and it's a watchdog, and you can see again there's space here for text for the book covers as well. So this is 1983, and again you also see this type of architecture that is common in Louisiana in the southeastern United States. These balconies that, you know, famously in Louisiana there's hotels and, you know, people throwing beads and stuff down onto the passersby below during Mardi Gras. Anyway, he completes that first painting, and you can see it's different than the one we're about to do today, but some of the key iconic elements are already in place. The seated pose of the dog is certainly one of the main features, and the sort of blank expression and the wide eyes, right? Especially the yellow eyes of this dog. And he has an exhibition in Los Angeles. I don't know if any of this is repeated here, but so that painting and a number of other ones, because he's like, oh, this is kind of cool. He exhibits it in Los Angeles, and he goes out there for the show, and he hears people, oh yeah, here it is. He hears people talking about them, referring to, oh, I really like that painting of the blue dog, the blue dog. Everyone's talking about this blue dog. There's something about that image that has clearly resonated with viewers of the exhibition. And, you know, more so than in any of the other paintings he's got on display. And he's, you know, the wheels start going, interesting. People are really into this painting of my blue dog. Or my old dog, Tiffany, which had since passed away, that I was using for this werewolf kind of imagery. And I think when he talks somewhere, or in one of the interviews I watched, there's I'm just going to play this just so you can hear his voice real quick.
I started painting ghost stories, and one of the stories,
which is, you know, his accent is so, it's very particular. Like, it kind of reminds me of kind of a little bit of a Texas thing with a little bit of like a classy flair of French or something in there, right? But anyway, he talks about that the people referring to this image, the Loup-Garou, as a blue dog and rather than a werewolf, kind of helped him kind of break away from the original Cajun legend of this that he had originally used the dog for, right? And that was for him kind of a big step, because he was like, I don't know how much space, you know, like, am I going to paint werewolves this for the rest of my career? Probably not. But a blue dog, right? That's something that's kind of divorced from maybe some of his own personal or family background, cultural background, and could be something else entirely that could be his, right? So I think there's kind of this series of fortunate events, and he just decides, well, let's make a few more of these. These blue dogs are clearly popular. People at the exhibition are asking for them. They want more of them. And okay, so I'm going to indulge people. And he just keeps on making more and more and more of these paintings. So here's the one we're doing today here. It's interesting because those dog paintings become more and more and more popular. Maybe not within the so-called high art world, but within sort of the circles that he's traveling, because Louisiana is, you know, it's not traditionally seen as like a major power center for the international art market. There's certainly lots of artists and music and dance, you know, lots of culture in Louisiana, but it is sort of part of that, people consider that flyover states between New York and Los Angeles. And so artists who live in those areas end up having to really kind of fight and claw their way within their own local community, and kind of maybe using less traditional pathways to success, including exhibiting in maybe not necessarily always in art galleries and museums, but in coffee shops and in local theaters, in restaurants, community centers, etc. Right? All of which I think are totally legitimate, and but not seen as respectable by certain snobby people out there, right? But anyway, one of the things that does is it brings him into the orbit of the advertising industry. And having been a student at Art Center in Pasadena, California, again, where I also studied, Art Center is and especially back in the day when George Rodrigue went there, was a really important school for illustrators and designers, anyone who was thinking about going into the advertising world as a creator. So and it's since become also very, very important for car design. It's probably the #1 school for car design in the world, and it also has a very important graduate fine art program where I went to. So I think he's sort of working in kind of putting his work into these less traditional exhibition spaces. He has this background, at least taking some advertising illustration classes, and then lots of friends and peers who went into that field while he was in school. And it's like, I'm not exactly sure the story of how he gets approached by the Absolute Vodka brand, but he ends up creating a number of artworks for Absolute Vodka, which propel him into global recognition, because these Absolute Vodka ads also featured work most famously also by Andy Warhol. I would say probably Warhol and George Rodrigue are probably the two artists most closely identified with this Absolute Vodka campaign. There are many others, but maybe it was just the magazines that I was buying back in the maybe early 90s. But there was a time where every magazine, it seemed, on the back of the magazine would have an Absolute Vodka ad that had either was done by Warhol or George Rodrigue. And so I mean, all of a sudden, this artist who's, again, working in this relatively small regional art community and making, a dozen or so paintings on his own and has a small following, now all of a sudden is on the back of magazines that are in homes, millions and millions of homes across North America and as well around the world. And people are probably like, wow, I recognize Warhol, I know that name, and he's done a whole bunch of these covers. Who's this other guy doing these blue dog paintings? And, had there been the internet back in the late 80s, early 90s, I'm sure probably who does the blue dog paintings would have been one of the most searched search terms on Google, had Google existed back then. So it's interesting how that really made him a household name. And I just find that really interesting, because I'm sure probably even at the time some people are like, oh, you're selling out George by you're taking the evil payout by this global multinational company. And he's like, yeah, but you know what? For whatever benefit they're getting from me, I'm getting 10 times the benefit from kind of attaching myself to that brand. So that instantly over, you know, the next few years, really the 90s, you know, the Blue Dog artworks become some of the most iconic paintings being painted anywhere on Earth at that time. And one of the great things that happens with that newfound celebrity and wealth and power is that he did a number of really incredible things with that. One of which you may have heard of, the Hurricane Katrina. As I mentioned, that Louisiana particularly was really hit hard by this massive hurricane that flooded many parts of Louisiana and also other places in the Gulf of Mexico. But one of the things that he does is he makes a series of prints that he uses as fundraisers to help various different organizations, including the Red Cross, as well as the museum, New Orleans Museum of Art. I think it's NOLA, or NOMA, and he raises almost $1 million in the sale of these prints. So this is kind of, I think, the first one, We Will Rise Again, and you have his blue dog here underneath the water. There's an American flag and the Red Cross symbolizing like help is on the way. And so that's the first one. He makes a number of other ones here. We'll get back to that. As you can see, here's him. Look at this big stack of prints that he's signing. And obviously they're super popular, right? Raising millions of dollars. Here's another print that he makes. Again, trying to raise money to help rebuild the levees, which had failed during Hurricane Katrina. Encouraging kind of cutting through the red tape, because that's one of the problems with after a big disaster like that is not everyone is able to access the support. Even though there might be support, some people have an easier time of accessing those funds and etc. So here's a whole bunch of series of prints that he makes. This as well. I love these, the dogs playing jazz, and there's of course the blue dog down there in the bottom. So let me see, is there another one? I mean, he literally did hundreds and hundreds of different versions of these dogs. And it's interesting, you know, when you look at the difference between his work before the Loup-Garou or the blue dog versus where he eventually ended up in, it seems dramatically different. I think this is the last painting that he made. And what's interesting here is you see a little bit of that iconic Louisiana landscape, or at least this droopy oak tree kind of reappearing. So it does make me wonder, you know, had he lived another 5 years, 10, 15 years, would we see him return to that type of artwork that he was making prior? Like, let's see. This Aioli Diner is, I think, considered to be sort of his first, like, really big, important painting. And we see all of these, you know, these guys, all guys, having this big dinner here, and people gathered around. You know, it's in a big field outside. They named there's a restaurant, the Supper Club, named after this painting. And here's Georges Rodrigue's Instagram. Now, of course, he passed away about 10 years ago, but he has quite a large foundation that continues to produce work and sponsor events and support various different charities. Another big, really important thing that Georges Rodrigue did is he established a foundation, the Georges Rodrigue Foundation of the Arts, which provides money for the teaching of visual art in public schools throughout the Louisiana area, and that I think is awesome. I think, you know, it's really sad that so many schools no longer have art programs or music programs anymore, and at least in the States, one of the ways that really the only way that most students in the United States, unless you're in a private school, are able to access art education is through private funding. Donors who, like Georges Rodrigue, provide some assistance so that students can learn how to paint and draw and play music and all of those things, which are critically important, more so now than ever, because you know, the traditional way of learning, just memorizing dates and places and math equations, when we have computers that can do all of that, more so than ever, we need people who are creative thinkers and who can come up with creative solutions to problems. And that doesn't, whether you want to be an artist or not is irrelevant. Being able to come up with solutions to problems, if you're a police officer, you know, when you have to think on your feet, or you're a CEO, or you're, you know, working at a drive-in, right? There's all sorts of crazy things that happen, and if you haven't developed the ability to think on your feet and be creative, right, that can really make life very difficult for you. So I think that's fantastic that just a few years before he died, he established this program, which has contributed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to his local community. Again, I suggest you follow his Instagram here. And what else? Is there anything else? There's again lots of great interviews where you hear him talking about his work, about the love of his dog Tiffany and how it inspired the creation of this whole Blue Dog series. And I'm really excited to try to recreate this painting by Georges Rodrigue, because it's one of those, you know, artworks that is, you know, so iconic that I think maybe people, you know, don't even realize they know of it until they see, like, oh, that's the guy who did those dog paintings. That's so cool, right? So let's get to it and let's actually paint this dog. So our next step here, should we want to do it, is do an underpainting. So sometimes artists combine the Imprimatura and the underpainting and maybe even the first background pass all in one. I'm just thinking to myself, do we need to do that today? I don't think so. Today, often I do an underpainting when we're painting portraits, because it can be really helpful. And the way that I use underpainting in these classes is I would mix up a really dark color, maybe a black or a dark brown, or maybe in this case a dark blue, and I might paint over some of the details that I might be afraid I might lose a little bit of that in the painting process. But because of the way, the very graphic way that Rodrigue has painted this, I feel pretty confident that I'm not going to lose. I'll be able to find my way through this painting. But if you work on this painting and if you're like, oh my goodness, I lost all that detail, well, maybe doing it again and doing a little bit of painting with some black outlining, maybe where the eyes are, that could be really, really helpful. But I think we can do this on our own without it. So let's then go to, let's go right to the background, and we're going to start putting some color directly into the background. And which colors should we use? Now, obviously, we've got this, the warm yellow is going to, I think, obviously it takes care of much of that. But I do want to have a little bit of fun mixing some greens in here and playing around, maybe even a little bit of white. So let's get a paintbrush out. And you know what? I'm not going to use my biggest brush. Is that going to be too small? I think I'm going to use these two brushes, so that, because one of the things I want is I want to be able to see some of my brush strokes. The bigger the brush you use, the less likely that little brush strokes are going to remain visible, right? It's the same sort of thing like if you're painting, you're repainting the walls in your bathroom. You know, if you use a tiny little brush like that, first of all, it's going to take you forever, but you're going to see lots of texture on the walls. Versus if you use a roller, it's going to kind of minimize or eliminate texture altogether. So let's where should we start here? I'm actually going to take a little bit of my cool yellow and white, and I'm going to paint a bit of that a few places here. Now again, that's going to be super subtle. One thing, if you add a lot of white into this paint, it will cover up your pencil lines, and if you're afraid that you're going to lose too much detail there, then maybe just be careful about adding too much. Now here's just some of this yellow with less and less white in there, so I'm just taking so this also, by using a cool yellow, is going to help push the warm color back a little bit, because generally we want our cool colors in the background. Okay, let's wait for whoa. Okay, come on. I have no idea why that's just the... Okay, one more time. It's never lasted this long. Okay, come on. Pascal says it's George Rodrigue's presence. Okay, this is crazy. I'm gonna have to do something here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's come back to this here. I'm just going to put a bit more of this yellow. with my cool yellow with a little bit of white. It is, after all, originally a werewolf for a scary story, so maybe it's appropriate that the lights flickered. Okay, now I'm going to take some of my warm yellow, and I'm just going to mix some of that into this mixture as well. And I'm not worried again if I go a little bit over my pencil lines. Take some yellow back, the cool yellow back onto my brush. Now I'm painting this pretty quick. I could put some slow dry medium in here just to kind of speed or slow the drying time down a little bit, but I think we'll see. I think this might be okay. Let's take a little bit of cool blue now. Take a little bit of warm blue, mix that in here. That's going to give me a bit more of a grassy green. Maybe not. Maybe I don't need so much of that after all. I guess I want a bit more of that. More saturated. So you can see like the signature just kind of disappeared. I think it'll come back out a little bit as I blow dry it, or as this dries. So I'm just taking this paint and kind of just smearing it in a few places, and then I'm going to come back and try to blend that back in. And potentially even just sort of wiping maybe some of that excess off. Just going back into my yellow here. One thing that starts to happen is as you work on something like this, the paint starts to dry and it can kind of get a little sticky, and you might feel like, you know, it's peeling paint away or not blending well. Again, you could use more paint by painting thicker. The paint stays wet longer, or you could use some slow dry medium in there like this. Now, I didn't do that because I figured, you know, if I'm painting relatively quickly, I should be okay. You'll notice that I wasn't too concerned about getting this to look exactly like the original. I don't think that's going to be something that's going to, you know, be too much of a problem if some of these streaks aren't quite exactly the same. I think that's probably good. I think what I will do, I want to get a bit more of this almost a little bit more orangey color in here. But I think what I'll do is I'll let this dry, and then I'm going to come back in a subsequent layer and put a little bit more orange back into a few places. But as I always say, like, one reason why I liked spending a little time in the background, going to the foreground, and then go back to the background a second time, or even a third, fourth time, is that it's hard to really fully judge how successful that background is right now when I don't have a big blue dog right in the middle of the painting. You know, it's all just all a lot of yellow, so it's like, so once I get that dog in here, that's probably going to clarify how I did with the background. All right, so sometimes the answer isn't more paint in the background, it's do the foreground and then come circle back around here. You guys, some kind of haunted paintings. I'm just reading the end of this conversation, Lolly and Pascal here. Okay. So now let's go into the foreground and take a little bit of time to paint the dog itself, the Loup-Garou, based upon his old childhood dog, Tiffany. Maybe let's just take a look at these colors and just think a little bit about what colors he's using here. So almost certainly this dog is painted with either cobalt blue or ultramarine blue, which are both warmer blues, especially ultramarine blue. There might be a little bit of cool blue in certain parts here, so which is not surprising. But let's start mixing some paint, and we can kind of compare and contrast, right? In fact, maybe we should do, just so you can see the difference. I think there's probably a little bit of this cool blue up here, so just out of curiosity, what if we put a bit of that there? And then I'm just going to wipe that off. And this is going to look much darker, this warm blue on this yellow surface, so that's the right color, and they're going to mix together as well. I do think that I might put a bit of white into this paint at this stage and paint over a lot of the body right now. Including this area here. Because that's going to kind of cover up most of the yellow and really allow me to paint a darker, more saturated blue over top without any issues. So notice how, as I'm painting this, I'm kind of deliberately leaving a little edge. That way I'll be able to find the lines here later on as well. So I'm not at all worried about getting this correct or precise. I'm just laying groundwork. Okay, I'm going to add a bit of cool blue into the same mixture here. I'm just going to take a little bit of this same blue here and just kind of paint a few places with it. Okay. Might have painted a little bit too much of that cool blue around, but that's probably okay. Take my warm blue again, and this time I can just paint right into some of these darker areas. Okay. Maybe while I'm here, maybe it's, you know what, maybe I gotta just take some of this paint off. take just some white out of the tube here. I'm okay with it getting a little bit dirty as well, I should say. Which is why I painted a bit of blue underneath here. Just gonna clean that off. Now I'm just gonna take some white and a bit of warm yellow. So I'm putting white down here so that I can paint warm yellow right over top once that dries. And I can make those really, really fierce orangey eyes. Okay. Maybe before I move on here, there's just, I don't know, 50, 60 comments. Whoa, there's more than that. There's a lot. Let me just see if I can quickly see here. Pascal, you did say he's one of your favorite painters. George Rodrigue is one of my favorite artists. It's funny when you say the same thing over and over hundreds of times. You make one little difference. It seem noticeable, doesn't it? Adrian said, I didn't know that we have a live stream here, but where I am, it's the time of sleeping. So I appreciate you staying up a little bit later to watch. Thanks, Adrian. Cool, you're watching the beginner painting and drawing videos. Awesome, Adrian. I can't wait to see what you've been up to. If you haven't posted them on the Facebook group already, it'd be awesome to see. There's Christine. Deborah says, Gracie, our dog was very sick and almost died. She's healing and is so much better now. I'm painting her in this style, and it would be perfect to celebrate her getting better. That is awesome. Kathy says, Michael, I bought Amsterdam Azo Yellow Light by mistake, not primary, just a little bit more bright and electric. I feel like it's close enough. So Azo yellow light's going to be a little bit closer to your cool yellow. It won't be quite as orangey as the Azo yellow deep, which is fine. You might notice that you might have, it's just going to, you won't be able to get quite the same orange. You could try adding a little bit of warm red to bring that Azo yellow light a little bit closer to warm. You're not going to notice so much of a difference between the yellows, especially when we apply them in like this. Pascal says, I've seen the actual place of the battle. Maybe that's the Plains d'Abraham in Quebec City. It is kind of amazing if you go there. It's not that big of a place, and you think like, wow, this is where one of the most famous battles in Canadian history took place. I mean, obviously, the scale of armies, well, I was going to say back then, but there were some huge battles at some points, but and then it could all come down to just one little field like that. It's pretty remarkable. Well, he says, I went to France when I was younger and saw some of the World War I battlefields. My mind was blown and my heart wrenched seeing all that at once. I went to saw the battlefield memorial for Vimy Ridge in France, northeastern France near Belgium. That's pretty wild. It's actually literally a Canadian national park and Canadian territory gifted by the French people to honor the sacrifice by Canadian soldiers who died in that important place. And when you go there, I mean, I think every Canadian should go there just to see the conditions that war was fought in. And when you can see places where the trenches were, I'd say a stone's throw, but not even a stone's throw, like 4 or 5 meters away, or what's that, like 10, 15 feet away, right? So you're just imagining, you can literally see the color of someone's eyes from that far away, and you're shooting at one another, throwing hand grenades back and forth. Just craziness. Pascal says, Kathy, the Amsterdam yellow light is using pigments PY74, not a bad yellow. Oh, and as I see Paula, is Paula there? Oh yeah, Paula's there saying hello. Awesome to see you, Paula. Well, he says, thankfully, today we can concentrate on a sweet blue doggo and not war. Totally. Paula just got back from the senior center. Beautiful nature, even with the rain. Weeping Willow, that's the name of those trees down there in Louisiana. And, yeah, oak trees like Lisa says here. Pascal says, but Loup-Garou means werewolf. Yeah, hopefully I covered that when I was talking about the history of this painting, Pascal. Oh, there are so many comments rolling in here. It's hard to have to move on here. I'm still not even at the bottom. Okay, there's... I'm gonna move on, even though there's still... Wow, another 100 comments to go. I'll come back after this next step here, so I apologize. I'm just catching up to the conversation from a half hour ago. Okay. Okay, so I'm confident that I've got my background well started and my foreground well started. Now I just want to come back to the background and hopefully finish that off so that I can move on to the foreground and wrap this painting up all together. So let's just take a look at the background, and now let's put them side by side with my painting. Now that we've got a little bit of this blue in here, is there anything I do want to change? I think it's working pretty well, although I do think I want to add a bit more warm yellow down in here. And you know what? That's not quite enough. So I'm going to take a little bit of warm red. And when I say a little bit, like, I mean, we're talking a little bit. Because we put too much in here and it's going to get, you know, very clown color very quickly. That's good. That's getting closer to what I want. I think a little bit more. Fell in my studio and just scared the lights out of me for a second. I think might be again the spirit of Tiffany here, or the Loup-Garou. That's better. I'm feeling that orange a little bit more. Now, I in a few places, a little bit of this yellow and red, barely any red, mixed in with some of that blue. I'd have to be careful because that's going to go brown almost instantly. Not that there's anything wrong with brown, but we just don't really see that so much in this painting. So I'm just going to take a bit of the yellow again and just my cool yellow, and maybe just blend a little bit back up. So I think it's like the spending just that extra little bit of time blending and doing like a second coat that's going to kind of integrate those brush strokes more. That's again why doing a second coat is always kind of a, not a second coat or just a second pass, because I'm not going over everything here, but a little bit is an important role. Okay, I don't want to do more. Put a little bit of that, and then it's going to wipe off that excess so that I can kind of try to integrate just a little bit of something a little bit darker in here. Okay, I really feel like I'm putzing around there, but I also find that kind of stuff really fun, you know, like that little subtle blending and stuff. It does look way more complex than the first time I went over the painting, where it just seems like I was trying to mimic a look rather than really reproducing that look. Right? I don't know if that distinction is clear. Like the difference between sort of just like a I don't know, it would be like dressing up as something, as a this is like a doctor for Halloween versus like becoming a doctor, right? One is just sort of just passably, you know, vaguely accurate, whereas one is trying as much as possible to literally embody that look and technique. Okay. Let's go to the next step. Okay, so I think I'm ready to move on from the background and work on the dog in the foreground, the Loup-Garou, the werewolf, and yeah. So let's do that. Let's just take a look at them and just see how we've done so far. That and that. Okay. So what we want to do is we're probably mix a black now, and then we're going to add that to mostly warm blue, but we'll be a little bit of both here. So let's make some more cool yellow. Oops, okay. So let's take our cool yellow and our cool blue and mix up the color, and we get this green, a nice saturated green. And then let's take an equal amount of warm red, and this is going to get us pretty close to a black. Now that color is a brown. Well, it's almost like a little bit of a purpley brown. So I'm going to add some more blue to that brown. And that's going to bring us pretty close to a black. Just a little bit more. There we go. So now, for the first time, I think I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. I'm going to go to something much smaller. Actually, I just want to show this off because it's a slightly bigger brush. I just want to show you, it's just something I just did over the last few days. So here's a little brush that often as you use a paintbrush, sometimes the wood of your paintbrush falls, okay, so sorry, if you've been using a paintbrush for a while, or even sometimes not for that long, this metal part that holds the bristles together and attaches it to the wood handle, sometimes that comes off. This is called the ferrule, and the ferrule, you know, is ideally clamped pretty tight and maybe even glued there, but sometimes it falls off, especially if your paintbrush is sitting in water soaking, and that can be really frustrating. So one of the things that sometimes I've done here, and I did this to my big brush here that I use at the beginning for all my Imprimatura, you'll notice it's like, what is this thing there? Is that big gob of paint? What it is I just take that paintbrush, I take one of my painting rags and I cut like a little strip, like a Band-Aid length strip, and then I put some glue, this Gorilla Glue, I put it inside and slide that on top, and then get a big goop of it, and then wrap that little strip of fabric. Do I have any more of that left over? Yeah, it's basically like this. I just goop it and then wrap it around really tight. And what that does is it sort of behaves like a cast that solidifies the ferrule to the wood again. Because sometimes I just put a little bit of that glue and then it falls off again and again. I found this works really well. And then I just painted it black to kind of make it fit in a little bit better, so it's not... But that's one thing I love doing, is rescuing a brush that is still more than fine, useful, from the garbage bin. So if you're wondering what this is, that's what that is. Okay, let's go in here. Where should we start? You know what? I'm going to start kind of down near the bottom. That way, if I have any problems, most people are probably not going to look at the feet first in a painting like this. So, you know, while I'm mixing and figuring out exactly how to do this, you know, I'm going to work on an area that might not be immediately attention grabbing. It's the same sort of thing when they tell you to, you know, test fabrics, laundry. Like when they say test the laundry detergent on like the inside of a shirt or something, just to make sure it's not going to stain or something like that. Same sort of approach. So I'm going to take some of my warm blue and some of that black. Now this isn't the darkest color that I can get here. Okay, now I'm just going to take some warm blue on its own. some warm, warm blue on its own. Why did that? I'm just going to scoop out some of that black. And now I'm just taking some blue and just mixing this directly onto the painting itself. Let's just wipe off some of that excess black. Maybe I'm just going to wipe a bit of paint away here. So I'm also trying to avoid just big, pure, straight lines and try to get a little bit of, you know, shakiness to give it the look of fur, right? Okay. So I think that worked out reasonably well. Let's do the same thing for the dog. The Loup-Garou's face here. Let's start on the left. So I'm going to take my black to start. One thing that's also going to help get a bit more of a wobbly line is holding the brush about as far away from the tip as possible. And you might say, well, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to have less accuracy? That's crazy. Well, sometimes having like really clean straight lines is something you really want, and then sometimes you want something that's has a little bit more wildness or something. That's also why kind of painting with a bigger brush can be really good practice, because it's also going to kind of take away some of the one's ability to be super perfect. And yeah, does that kind of make things difficult? Yeah, totally. But I think otherwise it can sometimes make a painting look like really like stiff and awkward if everything is sort of just really tentative, and sometimes you want just a bit of wildness in your painting. Okay, let's take a little bit of warm blue. And I'm kind of partially painting over top of this black, which will actually make the black even darker because ultramarine blue is very transparent. So it's just gonna, yeah, it's gonna make everything a little bit darker. Okay, now I'm going to start bringing some of this cool blue back in. Take a bit of cool blue, a bit of warm blue, and a tiny bit of white. I'm going to put all these together without blending them. Oops, so okay, I guess that maybe didn't come across. Let's do that again. Let's take some cool blue, or sorry, warm blue, cool blue, and white, all on the same brush. Where should we do this? Because we're actually going to kind of be mixing paint on the painting here. So that my brush doesn't just have one pre-mixed color on there from the palette, but lots of different colors. I got a few different blues and white. Okay, so maybe I'm just going to take my rag and just wipe that excess paint off, and let's take a bit more blue. So this is like, it's very hard to not overwork this. This takes like patience to let some of this paint just stay there. In fact, I would say kind of this type of approach to painting, at least with acrylic paint, is really tricky and take some finesse, because if I just keep on painting, all of that paint will eventually just blend together, and whereas I kind of want to preserve a little bit of that. Let's do a bit more, same sort of thing. So again, I just keep on going back, dipping into some paint with some slightly different amounts and ratios in there. Getting closer here. Okay. Oh, you know what? Let's, before I leave off of this, I'm going to paint. That's note. Okay. I can't, those nostrils are really, really light, but I'm just putting a bit of that cool blue in there just so that they'll be barely visible. Pascaline says, I'm going to go back to sleep. Kathy says, I've never seen this painting before, ever. I gotta go finish and I'll do it later. I'm so interested to see who's going to do today's painting. Oh, let's do, you know what, maybe... Okay, we're almost done. I just want to spend a little bit of time. We've got to paint some eyes and maybe just a little bit more black, maybe a bit of white. There's a few more things and we're almost done. So let's look at the original. Let's go side by side here. Now, obviously, his eyes, or her eyes, I guess I should say, right? It's a, well, I'm assuming Tiffany is a female dog, but... or was a female dog. Would have passed away in the, I guess, the 70s probably, right? So let's take some of this warm yellow, I think mostly warm yellow. Do I want to... Maybe I'll take a little bit of white as well. And just muck this up just a bit. I think I'm going to take a bit of warm yellow and a little bit of warm red again. Zanab says, I'm still painting. Good. Pascal says, good night. Okay. I think I might just quickly... Well, I was going to say, do I want to quickly blow dry this? Yeah, I think I'm going to quickly blow dry that. Okay. So now let's go into these details of the eyes. So I'm going to start out by just outlining the shape of the eyes again. I deliberately made them, you know, my yellows just a little bit, the yellows of those eyes a bit bigger. And then I'm going to do the other eye here first before I start doing anything else. I guess the one on the right is a little bit further down. My instinct is always to make things more symmetrical, but... Okay. Now this almost looks like eyelashes the way this is painted. Let's get a bit more blue into this black. I always find black just to be such a dull color. I mean, because it literally is absorbing the, the bright colors and that we see, and it just goes so flat and boring. So putting something in there is preferable to just the black all by itself. And that's not just me making stuff up. That's like kind of Impressionism 101, right? Trying to avoid just using black on its own because they really wanted to really access really bright colors. So and they really wanted to focus on light and painting light. So so I've got my warm blue here, and I'm just mixing it into my black. Okay, getting close here. I think I just want to use a bit of white next. So I'm just taking some white that actually had a little bit of yellow on it. I don't mind that. Get just a tiny bit of bloops, maybe a bit too much on here. Pretty good. What else do I feel like is missing there? I think that's pretty good. Let's, oops. On camera, that appears much lighter than it does in person. So I think I'm going to try to resist doing anything to it. Yeah, I think that's okay. So, almost done here. I think I want to put the signature in there. It seems like, you know, like the signature in this painting seems significant. Like it's very visible. It's sometimes I don't include the signatures in these paintings just because I feel like it's it's very small, or it's gonna get, or yeah. Whereas this, I feel like it's part of the composition. So maybe I'm just gonna quickly blow dry this before I do this next. Okay. So just cut out the signature. The reason why I didn't cut right along here is I need a little bit of space to kind of hold this down. Where do I want to put that? Something like that. Now I could just sketch it out, and I'm happy doing so, but maybe if there's other people out there that want to know how I would go about doing this. One thing you got to be careful of is that the paint will kind of stick to this carbon paper. I think I'm going to use... Should I paint this? How does it look? Oh, he did use a paintbrush. I was going to use a Posca pen. It's a little tricky painting that kind of detail. Okay, let's do it. Definitely adding my own stylized version of his signature here. And I guess hopefully if someone tries to use these templates to make forgeries, they'll be easily discredited. I think that might be good, right? Ah. Burnished it a bit too much. Meaning... Paula says, I think we should put our own signature. It is our painting. You could. I mean, I always like acknowledging the author of the painting as much as possible, but if you kind of change the painting enough, then I think it would make sense to make it your own. Okay. Okay, we're at that stage of the time of the day here where we're going to do our side-by-side comparison and see how they turned out. Just as a quick reminder, if you got this far, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Those are super helpful ways that you can help support the channel. You could be an all-star like Kathy, who goes back and comments on previous episodes. That is really helpful. It helps get people into painting when they see that there's more comments there. If there's only one or no comments on a video, people are like, maybe it wasn't all that good. That's why nobody liked it, right? So even if you commented in a live video, going back and commenting on some of your favorite videos after they aired is really, really helpful. And of course, if you want to leave a small donation, as little as $1, $5 through PayPal, you can use that. Super Chat through YouTube. Send an e-transfer through my email, which is on my website and the Facebook group. And if you want to contact me for whatever other reason, or you want to send a good old-fashioned check in the mail, let me know. Contact me through my Facebook, or through the Facebook, or my website. Okay, so let's see how these turned out. Oh, hold on, let's get this one. And there we are, side by side. Yeah, I feel like that turned out pretty good. I think I just want to take a bit of this warm yellow, maybe even a tiny bit of red. There's a little bit of blue there that drives me crazy as I looked at it. Okay. So, let's zoom in, if that's how this painting looks there. Okay, so we can just start with the thing I did last, which is this signature. You know, I kind of feel like maybe that's a little bit too clean for the painting that we just made. I could probably muck it up a little bit, but no, it's okay. It's certainly a little bit, you know, less controlled than if I was using a Posca pen to do it. But you could see that, you know, he was painting on a much larger surface, about 3 times the size of this. And so, you know, he's very quickly signed that. But I kind of like how that looks. So, let's look at these legs here. I mean, now that you can really see there's kind of some... the brushwork here that I did is almost all vertical, whereas we see he's sort of going in different directions here, left, right, and it gets, you know, it's more texture down there too. Yeah, I'm okay leaving it like that. In the chest here, the belly, I think I did a pretty good job. Again, you could see he's painting in different directions, whereas mine are mostly vertical. So his background is definitely way more expressive. Mine is just maybe a little bit too clean and organized. Let's just go all the way up to the top here. Maybe let's look at an ear. Yeah, I mean, I feel okay with how that turned out. Yeah, maybe it doesn't have all the same nuance that his has. Again, when you're painting on a large surface like that, there's going to be, versus a small surface that I'm painting on, it's really hard to get all those same sort of details. Yeah, I'm happy with that ear. And let's bring it into the face. Pretty close. I will say mine, maybe the eyes are a little bit more wide open and have a bit more of a surprised look. Whereas his has a bit more of a kind of a slightly sadder kind of quality, I would say. Does that make sense? I feel like mine is a little bit more surprised. His is a little bit sad. I mean, and that's just, we're talking such minor variations there that would cause that. think I could have also kind of added a little bit more blue under there. Do I want to do that? Let me just see if I take a bit more. I feel like I could fiddle all day. I think that's close enough for government work, as my grandfather always used to say. And there's my good old friend Brian Bunny Batista. I like how it looks. Thanks, Brian. Good to see you again. I love your YouTube videos. You're doing awesome yourself. Great job. Okay. So, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and painting along with me. I can't wait to see what you've done. Take a picture, upload it to the Facebook group, regardless if you did I guess a blue dog, just like George Rodrigue, or if you did something else entirely and you're just listening to my voice while you were painting. If maybe you made a cake, let's take a photo of the cake, see how that turned out. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening or morning, wherever you happen to be on our beautiful planet. And we shall see you again, I think, next week. There might be a bonus episode coming this weekend, but I'll have to check the schedule. Okay, we'll talk to you again. Have a great night. Bye-bye, everybody. That was awesome. I'm so happy.